Today, why downside scenarios must still be on the radar. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to the latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Well, of course, everybody is talking the economy up and the prospect of the vaccines curing the COVID-19 problem. Except things may be more complicated. And in my own scenario modelling, I do include some downside scenarios. In fact, I was asked about that on a recent ABC radio interview. I'll put a link to that below, because my view is that there are still a number of rather nastier scenarios that should be considered, as well as the upside scenarios. And those scenarios, unfortunately, are driven predominantly by adverse movements in the virus itself. Now, news.com.au published a pretty disturbing article today and basically said that new variants of COVID-19 are behaving like new viruses and may derail vaccine hopes. And this is from Shannon Malloy. At the end of 2020, as the world bid good riddance to a dreadful year, there was a great sense of hope that the impending rapid rollout of COVID-19 vaccines could see us turn a corner. After several months of illness, death, economic destruction and social upheaval, the promise of herd immunity via inoculations surely meant life was slowly returning to normal. But experts have today issued a dire warning that several new variants of concern spreading around the globe are acting in new and terrifying ways and threaten to wash away the precious ground that's been gained. And ultimately, it could mean that the war against COVID-19 is lost, even with effective vaccines. Put simply, the game has changed, and a successful global rollout of current vaccines by itself is no longer a guarantee of victory. A cohort of leading international medical and public health experts have written in a recent Conversation article. The alarming outlook penned by academics from the University College of London, Columbia University, Barcelona Institute of Global Health, Monash University, the University of Auckland, McMaster University and Caprisa in South Africa matches with a disturbing trend. Genetic mutations of viruses occur pretty frequently, but they're only deemed to be of concern if they're more infectious than the original, cause more severe illness, or are deadlier or can reinfect. Scientists knew COVID-19 was going to eventually evolve and mutate. That's what viruses do. But they thought it would take years, not months. We've expected the virus to change, Dr. Michael Diamond, a viral immunologist at Washington University, told the New York Times. We didn't quite anticipate how quickly it was going to occur. Already, 12 months on from the declaration of a worldwide pandemic, there are at least 3 strains of concern colloquially: the UK strain, the South African strain and the Brazilian strain. They are highly infectious, cause greater illness and are deadlier than what we've seen to date, and they impact population groups that so far have gone unscathed. COVID-19 variants of concern have changed the game. We need to recognise and act on this if we, as a global society, are to avoid future waves of infections, yet more lockdowns and restrictions, and avoidable illness and death, to say, of course, nothing of the economic fallout. Worse still, these mutations and others that follow could see vaccines rendered powerless to stop the spread and health consequences of COVID. If there are high transmission levels and hence extensive replication of SARS-CoV-2, anywhere in the world more variants of concern will inevitably arise and more infectious variants will dominate, they wrote. No one is truly safe from COVID-19 until everyone is safe. We're in a race against time to get global transmission rates low enough to prevent the emergence and spread of new variants. The danger is that variants will arise that can overcome the immunity conferred by vaccinations or prior infection. In the US, the rollout of COVID-19 vaccines has accelerated at an astonishing pace, hitting 4 million doses daily at the weekend and averaging about 3 million a day. So far, almost 19% of the population has received the jab, but despite that progress, there's been a sharp uptick in new coronavirus cases across the country in the past month. I think we still have a few more rough weeks ahead, infectious disease specialist and epidemiologist Dr. Celine Grounder told CNN. The cause? The highly infectious B.1.1.7 variant, also known as the UK strain. In America, it was first detected in Colorado in December. Now it's spread to all 50 states across the country and accounts for an estimated 1/3 of new cases. What we know from the past year of the pandemic is that we tend to trend about 3 to 4 weeks behind Europe in terms of our pandemic patterns, Dr. Grounder said. If that's the case, the US can expect a sustained and alarming rise in new cases and an onslaught of hospitalisations. The UK strain decimated Britain and is now tearing across Europe, seeing cases and deaths soar and undermining public health efforts. We have to think about the B17 variant as almost a brand new virus, Dr. Peter Hotez, the Dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Bayer College of Medicine, told CNN. It's acting differently from anything else we've seen before in terms of transmissibility, in terms of affecting young people, so we have to take this very seriously. Epidemiologists estimate the UK variant is 60% more contagious and 67% deadlier than the original virus. Those infected appear to carry a higher viral load and for a longer period of time. Nationally, new COVID-19 cases rose for a 4th consecutive week, the Centers for Disease Control and Protection confirmed at the weekend. We know that these increases are due in part to more highly transmissible variants, which we are very closely monitoring, CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky said. Initial characteristic of COVID-19 was that it didn't seem to adversely impact young and healthy people who contracted it. But in Brazil, a country ravaged by 13 million cases and more than 330,000 deaths, that's changed dramatically recently. The country's own variant, known as P1, has been devastating and is blamed in large part for new cases and deadly deaths reaching record levels. Like the UK strain, the Brazilian variant is highly infectious. As a result, hospitals have been overwhelmed with an influx of seriously ill patients, and intensive care units are at capacity in many cities. Among the sick in large numbers are young and otherwise healthy people. Epidemiologists fear P1 could be a staggering 3 times deadlier in infected people aged up to 45. And during the initial months of the pandemic, the average age of people hospitalised with COVID was between 60 and 65, health authorities in Brazil reported. But now it's estimated to be around 37. Similarly, the UK strain has also had a more severe impact on younger people, causing greater rates of illness that last longer. Unlike the US, Brazil's vaccine rollout has been slow and plagued by issues, with urgent efforts underway to source supply from abroad. And cases of the Brazilian strain have been detected elsewhere in the world, including Canada, Japan, and Europe. How these new variants of concern impact the efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines is under urgent investigation, but there are already early causes for concern. The third identified variant, the South African strain known as B.1.351, appears to reduce the efficacy of the AstraZeneca's vaccine protection from mild to moderate illness. A separate study also suggests that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines don't work as well against the South African variant. Recent real-world evidence from the UK suggests both the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines provide significant protection against severe disease and hospitalisations from the B.1.1.7 UK variant, the group of academics wrote in the conversation. Regardless, vaccines alone may not be enough to defeat COVID if action isn't taken to slow the renewed rate of infection. The cohort called for a global strategy of maximum suppression to lower the risk of further mutations. that lower the effectiveness of vaccines. Public health leaders should focus on efforts that maximally suppress viral infection rates, thus helping to prevent the emergence of mutations that can become new variants of concern. They wrote, prompt vaccine rollouts alone will not be enough to achieve this. Continued public health measures, such as face masks and physical distancing, will be vital too. Ventilation of indoor spaces is important, some of which is under people's control, some of which will require adjustments to buildings. Now, there are 2 points I want to make. Firstly, those new variants are in parts of the world where governments have not clamped down sufficiently hard early, and therefore the viruses have been raging and mutating. So therefore it is essential to suppress transmission. And if that means more lockdowns and more economic disruption, well, then so be it. The second point is that holding out for the virus to be controlled by vaccines may be a slim hope. And of course, that means there could be profound consequences on things like opening borders and expecting the economy to come back to normal. Which takes me right back to my key point. In my scenarios, as well as the upside scenarios, assuming the vaccine works and everything comes back to normal quite quickly, we still have to consider the alternative scenarios of continued problems with the virus and virus mutation, more lockdowns, and more economic downside. Now, if those downside scenarios are more true to what's going to happen, then as well as higher unemployment and significant economic impact, we're going to see home prices in particular also sliding, while of course mortgage stress and delinquency rises. So I have to tell you that this is not over till it's over. And unfortunately, I do believe that the powers that be and even the mainstream media up till this point have been too much focusing on the good news upside rather than embracing reality. The reason I run different scenarios is because I want to explore those different outcomes, both the very positive ones and the less positive ones, because it's important that people have a sense of where the relativities lie. And I will continue to run my models, and I will continue to adjust the relative percentages against each of the scenarios into the future. And I should make the point, as the ABC asked me, there is still a small risk of a very significant economic crash because the financial markets are probably overvalued in the light of what I've been saying today. Home prices are overvalued, and we know that there are already cracks emerging, for example, amongst some hedge funds and other areas in the financial infrastructure, which suggests that ahead things are also going to be under significant pressure. So my message today is simply this: hope for the good, but also plan for the less good is probably a very good piece of advice. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.